Welcome back to another Broken Podcast. I'm Nick Taylor. This week I wanted to touch base on how relationships can influence our mental health. When you put those two things together, relationships and mental health, for the most part, people think of romantic relationships. And it just stops there. The truth is that relationships throughout every aspect of your life impact you and leave lasting marks on your mental health, whether it be positive or negative. That's something that we need to consider as we carry on throughout our day-to-day lives. Because the majority of relationships that you encounter in your lifetime are not romantically involved, but rather platonic. If we walk through life in a state of complacency and don't acknowledge the other 99% of relationships that we encounter, the effects of those relationships will creep in and impact us without us even realizing it. Research shows that being socially connected is one of the strongest predictors of mental well-being. On the flip side, troubled relationships can seriously affect us. For example, a long-term study found that individuals in unhappy marriages were 3 times more likely to develop major depression. This episode explores how different types of relationship, romantic, family, friends, workplace, and community, can be sources of strength or stress for our mental health. Consider your own life. The comfort of a supportive partner or the pain of an argument with a sibling can send your mood soaring or plummeting. We'll unpack the latest research from experts about why this happens, share relatable life stories, and even offer some quick tips for keeping those relationships mentally healthy. We will hit the topic that comes to everyone's mind right off the bat, and that's how romantic relationships mold our mental well-being. It makes sense that these are the relationships that hit close to home the hardest, because a majority of our focus, time, and effort are spent wrapped up in these relationships specifically. Committed, loving partnerships can boost mental health. People in supportive romantic relationships report higher well-being and lower symptoms of anxiety and depression. One review notes that improving relationship quality often improves mental health more reliably than the other way around. In fact, even among people with serious conditions like psychosis, having a satisfying romantic partner was linked to better overall well-being. As Dr. Caroline Finkel observed through her research, a stable, healthy partnership can provide emotional grounding, reduce feelings of isolation, and create a sense of safety. On the flip side, relationship conflict or loss can trigger mental distress. A recent analysis found marital or relationship distress is as strongly linked to depression as major factors like childhood trauma. For example, one study found people in unhappy marriages were nearly 3 times more likely to develop a major depressive episode within a year. Breakups and infidelity also spike rates of anxiety and depression, especially for young adults facing their first heartbreak. Even short-term dating dramas can leave bruised egos or self-esteem. Think of the last time a romantic fight kept you up at night. That everyday truth matches what the data shows. Here's an example. Imagine a long-term couple. When they support each other through stress, they may feel calm and resilient, reflecting the research that good partners buffer stress. But if one of them becomes distant or they start fighting, the other's anxiety will climb. This mirrors studies. Marital conflict in particular was found to predict depression as much or more than risk factors like education or family history. From my own experience, the trauma and abuse I suffered through relationships has taken its toll on me. My first real love was a toxic relationship from both ends, but neither of us knew it at the time because we were just young teenage kids. There was pretty much the expectation that we would always be with each other. We had isolated ourselves from having friends independently from one another and were always present at each other's extracurricular activities. We were inseparable, but like I mentioned, it was toxic. Every penny I made was spent on her, for all the materialistic things she wanted. Being together was an expectation, and if it couldn't happen, there were repercussions. I was constantly compared to unachievable standards of full-grown men that I couldn't achieve. And that even led me to making a fake ID to get a full-time job at 17. And when that wasn't good enough, I started talking to recruiters from the armed forces. I was going to prove to her that I could be what she wanted no matter what it took. I gave up my passion for music, art, and writing and devoted all my time and energy into making a 16-year-old happy, even though nothing I did was good enough. The mental and emotional abuse got so bad that she even accused me of being the father of my youngest brother. When I left for basic training, I wrote her letters every single day, with nothing ever received in return. When she finally answered my one phone call I got a week, 4 weeks into training, she told me that she was dating someone else whose family had money, and he was even younger than her. I had asked this girl to marry me. I even bought a placeholder ring for a few $100s until I could afford the one she wanted. This relationship destroyed me, and I even believed all the hurtful things that had been said to and about me, even though a majority of them weren't true or were overly embellished. I believed for years, even into the marriage to my wife, that I wasn't good enough for anyone. And there are more relationships than that one that took their toll on me. One woman even faked being pregnant and faked a miscarriage. I had built an emotional attachment to the thought of a child that would never exist, and believed all of it until her parents found out the lies I had been told and spilled the hurtful truth to me. All this is to share that I am no stranger to the reasons why romantic relationships are the forethought when it comes to how relationships impact mental health. But here I am, many years later, and even with the ups and downs of our marriage, my wife has shown me what a real relationship is and the good that can come from that. With that being said, let's hit some of the ways we can take action in our romantic relationships to foster a healthy mental impact. First up, communicate openly. Practice active listening. Really hear your partner's concerns and reflect back what you understand. Avoid blaming language and share your feelings calmly. And with that, stay calm. Follow the HALT strategy from Dr. Gatchell. If you feel upset, check if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, and address that first before arguing. Taking a short break and revisiting a fight later can prevent hurtful words. Show gratitude. Regularly express appreciation for your partner. Simple acts like saying thank you or sharing something you appreciate can strengthen bonds. Gratitude exercises, like mentioning one thing that they did that day that you're grateful for, have been linked to better mood and relationship satisfaction. Set boundaries. This is something that we talked about last week, but it's important in every relationship, not just this one. If conflicts become too heated, agree to pause and revisit the discussion later. Be clear about your limits. As one expert advises, you can be there for someone and still establish limits. Healthy boundaries, like scheduling reset times after an argument, can keep love alive without burnout. With romantic ups and downs in mind, let's shift gears into another core influence: our family relationships, from parents and children to siblings and extended kin. A nurturing family environment is a powerful protective factor. Children and teens from cohesive, low-conflict families consistently show fewer signs of anxiety and depression later in life. For instance, a major U.S. study found that young people who grew up with strong parent-child bonds and little family conflict had significantly lower depression scores all the way into midlife compared to those from troubled homes. Supportive parenting and open communication give children a sense of security and self-esteem that carries forward into adulthood. Conversely, family discord can leave long-lasting scars. The Mental Health Foundation notes that childhood experiences like neglect, abuse, or constant arguing in the home can negatively affect one's future mental health. Many of us think of someone who grew up in a high-drama family, and indeed, research shows that those childhood adverse experiences are linked to a higher risk of depression, anxiety, and even physical health problems later on. A UK survey of young people in mental health services found that family relationship problems were the single biggest issue they presented with. Chronic stress at home, say parental divorce with ongoing conflict or a sibling bullying you, can model unhealthy coping and leave kids vulnerable to loneliness and low mood. Consider this scenario: a child that felt their parents' constant love and support. They did well in school and seldom felt anxious. After a very tense divorce of that child's parents, however, things changed. The child often felt on edge and had nightmares, a response mirroring how family stress impacts mental health. This contrast echoes studies. When that child's home life was stable, they flourished, but the turmoil afterward coincided with the rise of her anxiety. My own family dynamic is kind of unique and an oddity in today's day and age, especially growing up in the 90s and early 2000s when divorce rates began to soar. My parents remain married to this day, and I am one of 8 children. And to answer the question before you even ask, no, we're not Catholic. While I was growing up, there was a very close dynamic with my aunts, uncles, and cousins on both sides of the family. My cousins really felt more like siblings. My parents, aunts, and uncles were all relatively young when I was a kid, and I felt like that contributed to the close-knit dynamic we experienced. That dynamic did change for my siblings and cousins who were born later down the line, although there was still a tighter bond than seen throughout other families' relationships with extended family. But being naive to others' experiences, I didn't understand that it was different for other people. Really, until I married my wife. Finding out that we were the odd ones from a social standpoint was actually pretty disheartening. I wish that everyone could have had that experience that I did. All families have their challenges, though, so we haven't been a stranger to that. The important thing is how those are faced, and the unified effort made to overcome them. And it takes just that, a unified effort from both or all parties. No one person can take action and mend relationships of any type, especially when it comes to familial relationships. But that is where we can take some steps to mend broken relationships, rekindle estranged ones, and even strengthen the ones that may feel as though they're in good standing. The ways that we can do that is keeping communication open. Regular family check-ins, dinner conversations, or one-on-one talks can diffuse tension, encouraging everyone to share feelings honestly and listening without judgment. Show empathy and appreciation. Even small acts, a hug, a thank you note to a parent, a sibling complimenting another sibling, reinforce those positive bonds. Let your family members know you see and value their efforts. Set healthy boundaries. It is okay to say, I need a break if emotions run high. In families, this might mean agreeing to step away for a few minutes when arguments start heating up. Setting limits doesn't mean that you love them less. It prevents burnout and it prevents that resentment from showing up. Seek support. Family conflict can be tough to handle alone. Consider family counseling or therapy if needed. Or lean on trusted relatives and friends. Build a broader support network so you're not relying on one person for all your emotional needs. Family may be the ties that we're born into, but our friendships are the family that we choose. So let's talk about friends and why they matter so much for our minds. Strong friendships are vital to mental health. People with close friends report higher happiness and resilience. In fact, one 2025 study of teens found that having high-quality peer relationships was the single strongest predictor of well-being. It had nearly 3 times the impact on good mental health as reducing social media use. In other words, teens with supportive friends experience more positive emotions and fewer symptoms of depression, regardless of how much they're scrolling Instagram. For adults, friendships provide social support, validation, and a sense of belonging, all of which buffers stress. As the UK's Mental Health Foundation puts it, those who are more socially connected to family, friends, or community tend to have fewer mental health problems. On the flip side, loneliness and social isolation, conversely, are strong risk factors for depression and anxiety. Numerous surveys, including recent US studies, show a significant portion of adults often feel lonely or disconnected, which parallels higher rates of mental distress. A lack of close friends can leave someone without an outlet for stress or a source of emotional uplift. The feeling of no one really gets me can spiral into self-doubt. Moreover, toxic friendships, like envious and unsupportive pals, can be almost as damaging as having no friends by feeding insecurity or chronic stress. Picture this. After a hard day, you call your best friend to vent and laugh. She listens attentively and offers comfort, so you immediately feel calmer and more capable of facing tomorrow. Compare that to your neighbor who has few friends to talk to. When they felt low, they had no one to turn to, so their worries just swirled inside. Your scenario reflects research. Quality friendships can boost mood and resilience, whereas isolation, like your neighbors, leaves one vulnerable to depression. I mentioned toxic friendships a moment ago. Those kind of creep in on you, don't they? I know at least for me, I had long-standing friendships that lasted over a decade, and because of where I was at mentally and emotionally, I just didn't see it. It always feels good to be needed, but what if that is the only time someone ever calls you? I had many relationships that were just that. I was merely a tool or an avenue to get what a person wanted, and in many cases, that was the extent of the relationship. There would be some love bombing, coercion, and other manipulative tactics thrown in there to make it appear as if that wasn't the case. But over time and feeling comfortable with their grip on our relationship, even that would fade. As I started my own healing journey and realized that these were unhealthy relationships in which I had zero boundaries and had no benefit for myself in them. Once I faced that fact, I knew I had to just let them go. Even though I had been used and abused in most cases, it was still difficult to let some of them go. Because don't get me wrong, there were definitely some good times mixed in there. I still find myself missing them and wishing I could call them sometimes. But I know that opening that door will only cause more pain in the long run. It is really important that you set healthy boundaries in friendships, have open communication about the relationship that you have, and regularly assess the relationship with each other, much like you would with a partner. Because believe it or not, the damage that can come from a friendship turning for the worse can have just as painful and long-lasting impacts as that of one with romantic involvement. It may be a different dynamic, but we let friends in on an intimate level as well, which is why we have to work to foster healthy and quality friendships. So let's cover some things that we can do in respect of that. Reach out. Make time for friends. A quick text, coffee date, or a video call can strengthen bonds. Scheduling regular meetups, even if it's virtual, keeps friendships alive. Be a good friend. Show empathy and genuine interest. When a friend shares something, listen fully instead of immediately giving advice. Small gestures, like a kind message or celebrating their wins, let friends know you care. Join clubs, sports, or volunteer groups that match your interests. Common activities are natural friendship builders. Even online communities or hobby groups can lead to meaningful bonds. And prioritize quality. It's better to have a few close friends than many acquaintances. Focus on mutual respect and trust. High-quality friendships, those where you feel heard and supported, are what really lift our spirits. Beyond our own personal circles, many of us spend the majority of our waking hours at work. So how do our colleagues and boss fit into this mental health picture? Positive connections at work can make stressful days feel lighter. A friendly coworker or mentor can offer support and camaraderie. Nearly all workers, 92 to 95%, say it's important to feel respected and supported by their organization. When workplace fosters connection and community, employees report higher satisfaction and well-being. For example, employees who feel their work culture values well-being and respect are much more likely to say that they have good mental health at work. Unfortunately, toxic work relationships are very common. A recent APA survey found that 19% of employees described their workplace as toxic, and those workers were 3.5 times more likely to report harm to their mental health. Issues like office bullying, microaggressions, or an overbearing boss can trigger chronic stress, anxiety, or burnout. Even subtle exclusion matters. About a quarter of workers say they often feel lonely or isolated on the job, which mirrors how loneliness outside work impacts mental health. Over time, carrying work stress home can strain personal relationships and lead to health issues, even heart problems, as Harvard research has noted. Let's say in this scenario, you look forward to Monday mornings because you have such a supportive team. Y'all brainstorm ideas together, share lunch, and help each other under deadlines. This positive environment would buffer your stress and leave you feeling energized. In contrast, a previous job you had made you dread work. Your manager would often criticize you publicly, and you had no office friends. It made you constantly feel anxious and depressed, symptoms of how a toxic workplace can erode mental health. Such scenarios are borne out in surveys. Supportive colleagues protect well being, whereas toxic environments can severely harm it. I'll be honest, in my adult life, I haven't experienced a positive work relationship or work life balance. I have had to deal with bosses who extorted my PTSD from combat for their own entertainment. I have been threatened with my job for trivial reasons. I even lost some teeth in a workplace injury, and my boss illegally approved the cheaper route of sacrificing two of my teeth to have a bridge done when only one tooth was damaged, in order to save what they had to pay out instead of just removing the one damaged tooth and receiving an implant for that one. It cost me 3 teeth. My longtime career in networking was treacherous. Fear-mongering, lies, deception, gatekeeping, the list goes on and on. Customers felt way too comfortable since we worked in their homes and would in some cases act as if they owned you or as if you owed them something. And although there were many others working in the same position and doing the same things, there wasn't that camaraderie. We all worked individually, alone, all day long. So when you faced adversity, no matter where it came from, you stood alone most of the time. In some situations, it was humiliating and demeaning. Others, it was violent or dangerous. And sometimes it was just that the workload was too much to handle as one person, both mentally and physically. The company fired me. I can't disclose more than that at this time, but believe me, I will share it with you when I can. This doesn't include my military service, which is its own unique weight to carry. But I have realized throughout all of my experiences that the relationships with work have been the most toxic relationships overall in my life. Some of that is attributed to me placing my value as a person in what I can produce and how I can bring in income. But a lot of it can be attributed to how toxic each work environment I have experienced has truly been for me. If you don't take anything else away from this episode, heed this piece of advice. Do not stay in a toxic work environment a single more day. Because of the fact that we spend a majority of our waking hours at our place of work, that toxicity is going to affect every aspect of your life and every relationship that matters the most. And it is not worth losing yourself to a job that will post your position before your obituary is even written. With that being said, let's go over some tips for managing these relationships. Build supportive connections. Invite a coworker to lunch or coffee. Seek out allies and mentors who can listen or give feedback. Having at least one person you can trust at work makes the stress easier to bear. Communicate professionally. If conflict arises with a colleague or boss, address it calmly. Use I statements like I feel. And if needed, involve HR or management for mediation. Keeping problems out in the open often prevents them from festering. Here's another little bit of advice. No one can tell you that you can't contact HR. If you've ever heard that, get that out of your mind. Federally, you are protected in many ways. So if something has came up that you need to talk to them about, don't hesitate to talk to them. Set boundaries. Try to keep work reasonable. Take breaks, use your vacation time, and unplug after work hours. Clearly communicate your availability to your coworkers. Example, I'm focusing on this task until 5 p.m. so that work demands don't constantly overflow into your personal time. Seek resources. Sometimes people don't know about this, but many companies offer employee assistance programs. A lot of times, they don't broadcast that though, so it's something that you have to seek out. Counseling or stress management workshops are part of that. Use them if work stress becomes overwhelming. Even small steps like leaving your desk for short walks or practicing deep breathing during the day can help reset your mood. Finally, let's consider our wider circles, faith and community groups. Whether it's a church, neighborhood, or club, these ties can profoundly affect how we feel. Belonging to a community, religious or secular, often provides social support and a sense of purpose. Research constantly links community involvement to better mental health. For example, people living in neighborhoods with high social coercion report lower rates of depression and anxiety. Faith communities in particular offer rituals, group activities, and networks of support. Studies suggest that strong religious participation is associated with healthier coping. One review notes that religiosity correlates with reduced suicide rates and less substance abuse. The structure and rituals found in faith or community groups can help individuals handle stress through prayer, meditation, volunteering, and other things, and feel part of something larger than themselves. However, not all community ties are helpful. If someone feels unwelcome or judged, it can increase stress or isolation. Conflicts within tight-knit groups, like religious disagreements or community disputes, can cut deeply. Additionally, rigid doctrines can sometimes induce guilt or anxiety in members who struggle to comply. In secular terms, feeling like an outsider in your neighborhood or club can also cause loneliness. Basically, when a community fails to support you, it can leave you even more alone. Let's say you recently joined a local sports club. You quickly made friends and feel connected. When work was hard one week, your teammates rallied around and you felt uplifted. This highlights how community bonds can bolster mood. On the other hand, you feel out of place at your religious congregation, causing you to become more anxious. You don't share in the fellowship, and the lack of support worsens your isolation. These real-world patterns mirror research. Positive community ties often protect mental health, whereas exclusion can harm it. I have experienced religious trauma myself, which I think will make its way into being its own episode. It is important for you to have boundaries with your religious congregation and your communities, and understand the difference between volunteering your time and being extorted for free labor. Even if it is for an overall good cause, there is more than one way in which you can be exploited in the name of something that was meant to be profound and beautiful, in a heinous and malicious way. This bodes the same in secular communities as well. Have limitations on your time, involvement, and what you are willing to give, and stand firm in those. Because no cause is good enough for you to have to give up your entire self along the way. But here's some ways that we can foster positivity in these connections. Engage regularly. Join a group or community that interests you. It could be a faith group, a hobby group, volunteer organization, or neighborhood association. Attending meetings or events consistently to build connections. Contribute. Offer help or service, like volunteering for a local cause. Helping others and being needed can boost your sense of purpose. Studies show altruistic activities and community participation improve mood and reduce stress. Open up. Share your experiences with fellow members. If you're struggling, speak privately with a trusted leader or friend in the group. Religious and community leaders often have resources for helping members cope. And most importantly, find what fits. Not every group is the right fit. It's okay to try different communities until you find one where you feel valued. The key is quality of connection, not just attendance. Even a small supportive circle, book club buddies, small church group, or neighborhood friends can make a big difference in your well being. As we've seen, every type of relationship can lift us up or drag us down. Supportive partners, families, and friends can act as a buffer against life's stress, reducing anxiety and depression. In contrast, conflict and loneliness in any of these relationships can significantly increase our mental health risks. The good news is that many of the factors are within our control. Improving communication, setting boundaries, and building positive connections are backed by research and expert advice as a way to protect our well-being. Remember Dr. Finkel's insight that a healthy partnership provides emotional grounding and safety. Similarly, strong families and friendships can become that emotional anchor. By continuously nurturing the relationships we value, showing kindness, listening openly, seeking help when it's needed, we can harness the positive power of those ties. So as you go about your week, notice the small moments, a comforting hug, a word of praise, a shared laugh. Those moments are not just pleasant, they're building blocks for your mental health. Thanks for joining us today for this episode of Another Broken Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone that might need to hear it as well. Feel free to reach out to us by email at brokenmedia1984@gmail.com or on TikTok under the username Another Broken Dad. You can also just comment on this episode. Whatever way, I'd love to hear from you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the week that's ahead. Until next time, I'm Nick Taylor. Have a good one, guys.